From the moment he was born, Max never knew what it meant to feel safe. His world was a cold, unforgiving place, a rusty chain clamped tightly around his neck, the hard dirt beneath him his only bed. His days were filled with harsh words and rough hands, his nights filled with hunger and fear. For years, Max endured a life no living being should ever face. He was just a dog after all. To the people who kept him, he was little more than a tool, an object, a thing. But even in the darkest corners of his little world, there was a tiny flicker of hope, a longing for something better. You might think that after so much suffering, a heart like Max's would harden. But here's the incredible thing about dogs: no matter how many times life pushes them down, they find a way to keep loving, keep hoping. Max was no different. Beneath the layers of matted fur and the scars that crisscrossed his body, there was a heart that just wanted to belong, to be loved. And that's where our story begins, on a day that seemed no different from the countless others filled with misery, but one that would change Max's life forever. It was a cold, rainy morning when fate finally intervened. A kind-hearted passerby, Emma, was walking her usual route to work when she heard the faintest whimper. She almost didn't stop after all. She was running late and the rain was coming down harder. But something in that sound pulled at her, a quiet plea that refused to be ignored. Emma followed the sound to a small, dilapidated shed on the edge of the neighborhood. What she saw there made her heart break into a million pieces. Max, skinny to the point of being skeletal, cowered in the corner. His eyes, though dull and tired, locked onto Emma's, as if silently begging her not to look away. And she didn't. In that moment, Emma knew she couldn't just walk away. She called for help, and soon, Max was on his way to a local animal rescue. But Max's journey was far from over. The rescue team worked tirelessly to save him. The first few days were touch and go. Max was so weak that he could barely lift his head, and his body was riddled with infections. But even in his pain, there were small signs of the dog he could become. A slight wag of his tail, a soft nuzzle against the hands that fed him. Slowly but surely, Max began to trust again. And just when it seemed like Max was finally on the road to recovery, life threw another curveball. A complication with one of his injuries threatened to undo all the progress he had made. The rescue team was faced with a difficult decision, one that could determine Max's fate. But they weren't ready to give up on him, and neither was Max. His spirit, though battered, was unbreakable. This is where the story takes a turn that will leave you reaching for tissues. You'll meet the people who refuse to give up on Max, the moments that will restore your faith in humanity, and the incredible transformation that will prove that love and kindness can heal even the deepest wounds. But for now, let's leave it here on the brink of hope, with Max's future hanging in the balance. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us of the strength it takes to keep going, even when the odds are stacked against you. Max's eyes, once dulled by pain and hopelessness, now carried a faint glimmer, a tiny light struggling to shine through the darkness. The team at the rescue center worked tirelessly to nurture that light. Each day brought new challenges, but it also brought small victories. At first, Max barely touched his food, too weak and wary to trust even the simplest of comforts. But one evening, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden hue over his kennel, Max took his first few bites. It was a small step, but for the team, it felt monumental. Emma visited often, sitting quietly by his side, reading to him from her favorite books or simply talking about her day. She didn't know if he understood, but it didn't matter. She believed in the power of presence, in showing him that not all humans were to be feared. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her, his eyes filled with a quiet curiosity. It was as if he was beginning to piece together the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was safe now. The other dogs at the rescue had stories too. Some barked loudly, demanding attention, while others kept to themselves, their trauma still too fresh. But there was something about Max that drew everyone in. Volunteers would linger a little longer by his kennel, whispering words of encouragement, or slipping him treats when they thought no one was watching. They couldn't explain it, but Max had a way of pulling at their hearts in a way that felt deeply personal. One rainy afternoon, Dr. Keller, the rescue's lead veterinarian, called Emma and the team into her office. She laid out Max's latest test results, her expression a mix of hope and concern. Max's physical wounds were healing, but his journey was far from over. The infection in his leg was more severe than they initially thought, and there was a risk it could spread if they didn't act quickly. Surgery was an option, but it was risky given Max's fragile state. The room fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over them. Emma looked down at her hands, her mind racing. She had grown so attached to Max, and the thought of losing him now was unbearable. "What are his chances?" she asked softly. Dr. Keller sighed, her eyes kind but serious. "It's hard to say. He's a fighter, but he's been through so much. The surgery could save him, but there are no guarantees." The team decided to move forward with the procedure. They couldn't give up on Max, not when he had come so far. The night before the surgery, Emma sat with him for hours. She spoke to him in a soothing voice, telling him about all the adventures they would go on once he was better. She painted vivid pictures of parks with endless green fields, of warm homes filled with soft beds and gentle hands. Max's tail gave a faint wag, as if he understood the promise she was making. The day of the surgery was tense. Volunteers paced the halls, their usual cheerful chatter replaced with quiet prayers and nervous glances. Emma sat in the waiting room, her heart pounding with every passing second. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each minute heavier than the last. Finally, Dr. Keller emerged, her face weary but hopeful. "The surgery went as well as we could have hoped," she said, her voice steady. "Max still has a long road ahead, but he's a strong boy. We'll keep a close eye on him over the next few days." The relief in the room was palpable, but the team knew better than to celebrate too soon. Max would need round-the-clock care, and his recovery would be a delicate balance of rest, medication, and gentle encouragement. Emma volunteered to stay with him as much as she could, determined to be there for every step of his journey. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions. There were moments of triumph, like the first time Max stood on his own after the surgery, his legs shaky but determined. And there were setbacks, like the night his fever spiked, sending everyone into a flurry of worry. Through it all, Max's spirit remained unbroken. He leaned into the love and care he was given, slowly shedding the layers of fear and distrust that had once defined him. As the weeks turned into months, Max began to transform in ways no one could have predicted. His once patchy coat grew back thick and shiny, a testament to the nourishment and care he received. His eyes, now bright and alert, sparkled with a joy that had long been buried. He learned to play, discovering the simple pleasures of chasing a ball or rolling in the grass. But perhaps the most beautiful transformation was in the way he connected with people. He went from flinching at every touch to seeking out affection, nuzzling into the hands of those who had become his family. But even as Max's physical scars healed, the emotional ones lingered. There were still moments when a sudden noise would send him cowering, or when the sight of a raised hand would make him flinch. The team understood that healing was not a straight line, and they were patient with him, celebrating every small victory and offering comfort during the setbacks. One day, Emma brought a special guest to meet Max, a family who had recently lost their beloved dog and were looking to adopt. They were kind and gentle, their voices soft as they spoke to Max. He approached them cautiously, his tail wagging hesitantly. The little girl, no older than 6, knelt down and extended her hand, holding out a treat. Max took it carefully, his eyes meeting hers. In that moment, something shifted. It was as if Max could sense that these were his people, the ones who would love him unconditionally and give him the forever home he so desperately deserved. The family visited several more times, each visit strengthening their bond with Max. Emma watched from a distance, her heart full. She knew that saying goodbye to Max would be bittersweet, but she also knew that this was what he needed, a chance to start over, to live the life he had always deserved. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a new challenge arose, one that threatened to derail everything they had worked so hard for. It was a test of faith, of resilience, and of the unbreakable bond between a dog and the people who refused to give up on him. And as the story continued to unfold, it became clear that Max's journey was far from over. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place for Max, the kind of life he had only dared to dream about within reach, a new storm rolled in. It started with a routine checkup. Dr. Keller noticed Max limping slightly, something that hadn't been there before. At first, they chalked it up to overexertion perhaps. Max had gotten too excited during one of his play sessions. But as the days passed, the limp worsened. His boundless energy seemed to dim, and he started showing signs of discomfort even during his favorite activities. Emma, ever the vigilant advocate for Max, brought him back to the clinic for further tests. The waiting room was eerily quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights doing little to ease the growing tension. Dr. Keller returned with a furrowed brow and an X-ray in hand. She spread the images across the examination table, her finger tracing a small, shadowy mass that wasn't there during Max's last scan. "We've found something unusual in his leg," Dr. Keller explained gently. "It could be scar tissue from his previous injury, but there's also a chance it could be something more serious. We'll need to do a biopsy to be sure." The word hung heavy in the air, biopsy. It carried the weight of uncertainty and fear, the kind that Emma and the team had hoped they'd left behind. Max had already been through so much. The thought of him facing yet another battle was almost too much to bear. But there was no question about it. They had to know. The procedure was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, the rescue team rallied around Max, determined to keep his spirits high. Emma spent even more time with him, her pockets always filled with treats and toys to keep him engaged. The family interested in adopting Max continued their visits, bringing along blankets and toys to help ease his transition into their home. But despite their best efforts, the shadow of the upcoming biopsy loomed large. The day of the procedure arrived, bringing with it a familiar wave of anxiety. Emma sat in the waiting room, her hands clenched tightly around a lukewarm cup of coffee. She could hear the faint murmur of voices behind the clinic doors, the steady rhythm of footsteps moving back and forth. It felt like a lifetime before Dr. Keller finally emerged, her expression carefully neutral. "The biopsy went smoothly," she said, her tone professional yet compassionate. "Now, we wait for the results. It'll take a few days, but I promise we'll do everything we can to ensure Max is comfortable in the meantime." Those next few days were some of the longest Emma had ever experienced. Every ring of her phone sent her heart racing, every quiet moment filled with 1,000 what-ifs. She tried to stay positive, to focus on the fact that Max was still the same playful, loving dog who had captured everyone's hearts. But the uncertainty was a heavy burden. Finally, the call came. Dr. Keller's voice on the other end was calm but serious. "Emma, we've got the results. Can you come in?" Emma's mind raced as she made her way to the clinic. She tried to prepare herself for whatever news awaited her, but nothing could have truly braced her for what she was about to hear. The mass, it turned out, was a rare but aggressive form of bone cancer. Dr. Keller explained the options with a delicate blend of honesty and hope. They could try chemotherapy, which might slow the progression of the disease, or consider amputation to remove the affected limb entirely. Both choices carried significant risks and challenges, but they also offered Max a fighting chance. Emma's heart ached as she looked down at Max, who lay at her feet, his head resting trustingly on her lap. He had fought so hard to come this far, and now, he was being asked to fight again. But Emma knew one thing for certain: Max was a survivor. And as long as he had even a sliver of a chance, she would be right there by his side. The rescue team gathered that evening to discuss the best course of action. It was clear that no matter what, Max's quality of life would always come first. After much deliberation, they decided to proceed with the amputation. It was the most aggressive option, but it also gave Max the best chance at a long, pain-free life. The family interested in adopting Max was informed of the situation, and their response was immediate and unwavering. "We'll take him, no matter what," the father said firmly. "Max is already part of our family. We'll do whatever it takes to give him the life he deserves." Their commitment brought a sense of relief to Emma and the team. They knew Max would be going to a home filled with love and understanding, a place where his resilience and courage would be celebrated every single day. The surgery was scheduled quickly. On the day of the operation, the atmosphere was heavy with a mix of hope and anxiety. Emma stayed by Max's side until the very last moment, her voice steady as she whispered words of encouragement. "You've got this, Max. You're the strongest boy I know." Hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Finally, Dr. Keller emerged, her face reflecting both exhaustion and determination. "The surgery went well," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Max is in recovery now. He'll need time to heal and adjust, but I have no doubt he'll surprise us all with his strength." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew the journey was far from over. Max's road to recovery would be filled with new challenges, from learning to navigate the world on 3 legs to regaining his confidence and strength. But if there was one thing Max had taught everyone who crossed his path, it was that he was a fighter through and through. In the days that followed, Max began his rehabilitation. At first, every step was a struggle, his body adjusting to its new reality. But with each passing day, he grew stronger. The family who had pledged their hearts to Max was there every step of the way, their love and patience unwavering. And just when it seemed like Max was finally on the verge of finding his happy ending, life threw yet another curveball, one that would test the limits of his resilience and the depth of the bond he shared with those who loved him most. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. Max's journey toward recovery was nothing short of remarkable. Every hurdle he faced, he met with unwavering determination. Within weeks of his surgery, he was not only walking but running, his 3 legs carrying him with a newfound sense of freedom. His resilience was inspiring, and those around him couldn't help but marvel at his strength. The family who had committed to adopting Max officially took him home, transforming their house into a sanctuary of love and care. For the first time in his life, Max had a family that adored him unconditionally. He had a warm bed, a backyard to explore, and people who made sure he never felt alone again. Life seemed perfect, and for a while it was. Max thrived in his new environment. He played with the little girl every day, running after her in the yard, his bark filled with joy. He bonded deeply with every member of the family, finding in each of them a special connection. Max had finally found his forever home, a place where he belonged. But life has a way of throwing surprises, even when everything feels settled. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Max started behaving strangely. He stood by the door, ears perked up, his body tense as if he sensed something. At first, they thought he was reacting to a passing car or a distant sound, but Max wouldn't budge. He barked softly, pacing in front of the door, his eyes fixed on it with an intensity they hadn't seen before. The father decided to step outside to investigate, thinking maybe a stray animal had wandered into the yard. But when he opened the door, the street was empty, the night quiet except for the rustling of leaves in the wind. Max continued to act restless, his behavior growing more peculiar with each passing day. He seemed drawn to a particular spot in the backyard, often digging at the ground as if searching for something. The family watched him with curiosity and a hint of concern. What could he possibly be looking for? One afternoon, as Max dug furiously at the same spot, the father decided to help. He grabbed a shovel and started digging alongside Max, who barked encouragingly, his tail wagging with excitement. After a few minutes, the shovel hit something solid. The father carefully cleared the dirt away, revealing a small, weathered box. It was old, the wood damp and crumbling at the edges. The family gathered around as he lifted the box out of the ground and opened it. Inside was a collection of faded photographs, a few letters, and a worn leather collar. The items seemed to tell a story, one that had been buried and forgotten for years. As they sifted through the contents, they found a name on the collar, Buddy. The photographs showed a young boy with a dog that looked strikingly similar to Max. The resemblance was uncanny, down to the unique markings on his fur. The family was puzzled. Could this be a coincidence, or was there a deeper connection between Max and the dog in the photos? Intrigued, they decided to investigate. They reached out to the previous owner of the property, an elderly woman who had moved away years ago. When they showed her the photographs, her eyes welled with tears. She explained that Buddy had been her late son's dog, a loyal companion who had gone missing many years ago under mysterious circumstances. The boy and Buddy had been inseparable, and his disappearance had left a hole in her heart that never fully healed. The family shared Max's story with her, and as she listened, she grew quiet, her eyes fixed on the dog who sat patiently by their side. She asked to see Max's collar, and when they brought it to her, she gently traced the worn leather with her fingers. Tears streamed down her face as she recognized a faint inscription on the inside of the collar, the same name, Buddy. The revelation was both stunning and heartwarming. Somehow, Max and Buddy were connected, as if fate had brought him back to the very place where his journey had begun. The elderly woman believed Max carried the spirit of Buddy, returning to bring closure and peace to a story that had remained unfinished for so long. The family was deeply moved, and they welcomed her visits, allowing her to spend time with Max, who seemed to sense the special bond they shared. But the final twist came a few weeks later, during one of her visits. As she sat with Max, reminiscing about her son and Buddy, Max led her to another spot in the yard. He began digging again, his actions deliberate and focused. This time, they uncovered another box, smaller than the first. Inside was a locket with a picture of the boy and Buddy, along with a handwritten note that read, "For my best friend, always." It was a moment of profound connection, a bridge between the past and present. The elderly woman found solace in Max, believing he had returned not only to heal his own wounds but to bring closure to hers as well. Max, once a dog who had known only pain and suffering, had now become a symbol of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds that tie us together. As Max continued to thrive in his new home, surrounded by a family who adored him and a community that cherished his story, he proved that even the most broken souls can find their way back to happiness. His journey, filled with twists and turns, reminded everyone who knew him of the extraordinary power of love and the enduring strength of the human-animal connection. And in the quiet moments, when Max would rest his head on the lap of the little girl or look out over the yard with a contented sigh, it was clear that he had finally found his peace. Life in the family home settled into a peaceful rhythm. Max, once a symbol of pain and survival, had fully embraced his new life. His days were filled with joy, running through the yard on his 3 strong legs, chasing butterflies with the little girl, and curling up by the fireplace in the evenings. The bond he shared with each family member grew deeper, and their love for him only seemed to multiply. He was no longer just a rescue dog, he was a beacon of hope, a reminder of resilience and the power of second chances. The elderly woman who had shared her story of Buddy continued to visit regularly. Each time, she brought small gifts, old toys from Buddy's past or freshly baked treats for Max. Her presence became a cherished part of their lives, weaving her memories into their present. Watching Max thrive brought her immense comfort. She often said that while she couldn't turn back time, she felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Max's journey had healed not only himself but also the wounds of a grieving heart. As time passed, Max began to teach his family lessons they hadn't expected. His ability to find happiness in the smallest moments reminded them to appreciate life's simple pleasures. The way he approached every day with courage, despite his past and physical challenges, inspired them to face their own difficulties with strength and determination. Max was more than a pet, he was a teacher, a friend, and a symbol of unconditional love. One particularly warm summer evening, the family decided to host a small gathering at their home, inviting neighbors, friends, and volunteers from the rescue center. The yard was filled with laughter and the aroma of grilled food, and Max was at the center of it all, soaking up the attention. Children played with him, tossing balls and giving him treats, while adults shared stories of his incredible journey. It was a celebration not only of Max's new life but of the community that had come together to support him. During the gathering, Emma, who had been such a pivotal figure in Max's recovery, stood up to say a few words. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with emotion. She spoke about the first time she met Max, the broken and scared dog who had stolen her heart. She talked about his resilience, his journey through unimaginable pain to the joyous life he now led. Most importantly, she thanked everyone who had been part of his story, from the rescue team to the family who had given him a forever home. As Emma spoke, Max sat by her side, his head resting on her leg, his eyes reflecting a deep, quiet understanding. It was as if he knew this moment was about him, about his transformation and the lives he had touched. When Emma finished, the crowd erupted into applause, and Max barked as if to say, "Thank you." The gathering marked a turning point, not just for Max, but for everyone who had been part of his journey. It was a reminder of what could be achieved when compassion and determination came together. The family, now fully settled with Max, continued to spread his story, volunteering at the rescue center and advocating for other animals in need. Max became a local legend, his tale inspiring countless people to adopt, foster, and support rescue animals. But as life has a way of moving forward, time gently carried them all into a new chapter. The elderly woman, whose life had been so intertwined with Max's story, grew frailer with each passing year. Yet every visit with Max brought her a renewed sense of joy and peace. On one of her last visits, she sat quietly with Max in the garden, her hands gently stroking his fur. She looked at him with a soft smile and whispered, "Thank you for coming back, buddy." Max, as if understanding her words, leaned into her touch, his eyes calm and full of love. It was a moment of profound connection, the closing of a circle that had begun long before anyone could have imagined. When the elderly woman eventually passed, the family felt her absence deeply, but they also found comfort in knowing she had found peace, her heart mended by Max's presence. They planted a tree in the garden in her memory, a symbol of life, growth, and the bonds that transcend time. Max lived out the rest of his days surrounded by love. His once difficult past became a distant memory, replaced by years of happiness and comfort. He grew older, his pace slowing, but his spirit remained as vibrant as ever. Even in his later years, he continued to bring joy and inspiration to everyone he met. One peaceful morning, Max passed away in his sleep, his family by his side. It was a heartbreaking moment, but also a time of reflection. They knew Max's life, though shorter than they had hoped, was filled with more love and happiness than they could have ever imagined. He had taught them so much, and his legacy would live on in their hearts forever. In the end, Max's story was more than just a tale of rescue and recovery. It was a testament to the power of love, the strength of the human-animal bond, and the incredible transformations that can happen when we open our hearts to those in need. Max had shown them that no matter how broken someone may seem, with patience, care, and kindness, healing is always possible. And so, as the family stood together under the tree they had planted in his memory, they smiled through their tears, knowing that Max's journey had changed their lives in ways they would carry with them forever. His story wasn't just about survival, it was about finding joy, love, and belonging, even in the most unexpected places.